Well, hello and welcome to another Professional Advisor series of Advisor Champion interviews. I'm Julian Marr, Editor of Professional Advisor, and today I'm with Steve Kenny, Head of Sales at Kames Capital. Hi, Steve.
Hi.
We are going to kick off with our traditional first question. Two-parter, what do you see as the best and worst case scenarios for financial advice in the UK?
I think my sort of worst case scenario, which I'd start off with, I think it would be that decision-making trees become the norm across the board, and that advice is deemed not appropriate for a vast majority of the population.
Okay.
And not that I think decision trees are implicitly bad, but I think they have a place and it's not for everybody. I think the best thing that could happen to the industry, I think, would be that the industry regains the trust that I think it's struggling to deal with post the financial crisis, because I think the general populace can't differentiate between bankers and advisors.
Yes, as every BBC drama
Yeah.
tells us. Brilliant, thank you for that. Well, let's find a bit more personal now. How did you get into financial services? Can you remember that far back?
Yeah.
And what would you be doing if you hadn't?
Yeah, I can just remember that far back. I, like most people, stumbled into this industry. I was working in the NHS, having left uni, and in personnel. Most of my team would find that very hard to believe that I was in personnel, but what that entailed me doing is understanding pensions. And I had a very good grasp of pensions because I used to be involved in recruitment of ambulancemen. I then got offered a job to come down to London to work for a company called Crown Financial Management, who are no longer with us, thank God. And that's how I got into financial services. What would I be doing if I wasn't in financial services? When I was in uni, I used to work in a record shop and my passion was music. So I'd probably be a redundant record shop manager by now.
Oh, well, taking all that into account, not the record shop bit, from your experiences, what do you think advisors could be doing? What are they doing well? What could they be doing better?
I think what they're doing better now, and I think I've seen it through my 30 years, is they have moved from product to advice and solutions. And I think now when clients are talking to, when I talk about clients, I talk about advisors to the general populace, they are trying to identify what their goals are, what their objectives are. And I think in days gone by, regretfully, the industry was too focused on product pushing. And I think there has been a significant move to solution provision. Yeah. I think that's hugely positive for us. What could they be doing better? I think they should look to embrace technology. I think technology is not the enemy. I don't see robo-advice as an enemy. I see it as a facility to provide a nursery for the next generation of savers. So I think they should look at technology far more. It is an enabler for the new populace. The millennials, if they want to get those type of people on board, they've got to engage with technology. It also is a way of optimizing their business in terms of cost and efficiency.
Brilliant. You may well have answered the next question, but I'm going to give you the opportunity in case you want to talk about something else as well. In terms of a top tip for advisors to help them run a better business, we're always trying to be pragmatic on this series.
I think generally, one of the things I'd like to see the industry adopt is a common fact find. I think if we had a common fact find across the board, I was at an event a couple of weeks ago and there was a solicitor there, and I wasn't a court appearance, but he was talking about the fact for England and Wales, there is a common fact find, and therefore I could go and see you in London, complete a fact find. I could then go and see somebody else in Manchester, and I could take that same document. So I think commonality of documentation would be hugely positive for the industry, and that would enable us to stop spending, efficiency would come through that. And as I said, I think technology, I've been to see a number of advisors in the last few months, and lots of them are concerned about having execution-only services. And I think execution-only services help that younger generation get on board with financial services. Okay. And therefore, I don't see it as something that we should just say, well, that is the operation for Hargreaves or something like that. It is an enabler for them to get clients on board that are going to be tomorrow's bigger clients. And it's a facility that, I would encourage people to look at.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody's watching. Hopefully they'll take that on board. Hopefully a question close to your heart then. How, as a salesman, how would you define value for money in the context of financial advice?
Well, I think, and again, it sounds dreadfully cliched. I think everyone now has more complex lives. Just by, you look at the statistics, divorces are up, that all means complexity in people's personal lives. Personal lives require better than planning. I think, what is value for money from my perspective? I have recently been to see an advisor, having spent 30 years in the industry, and, the classic phrase of, hairdressers don't have good hair, and, it's probably slightly bizarre for me to make that type of comment, but I think trying to do my own advice wasn't a particularly good solution, and I went to see an advisor, and therefore what do I deem as value for money? The value for money was they've now helped me outline and plan for my goals. That's value for money. And the cost, I think, is relative to the complexity of the solution provided. So I don't see it as a £50 an hour, so, that's the answer. I think it is dependent on the complexity of the planning that's required. But ultimately, value for money is enabling me to get to where I want to be in my financial well-being.
Fair enough. And I guess all tied up with that, we also have risk. And so how would you explain risk to somebody who wasn't in financial services?
It's bizarre. I was at a dinner the other week and somebody asked me what I did. And, usually when people ask me what I do, I always just say, I work in the city, because, you then get into that dreadful conversation about, were you involved in the crash and all that. But I did tell them what I did. And then they said, well, I'm looking at saving. And the question of explaining risk. And I said, risk is all about, if you have £100 in the building society and somebody offers you the ability to make that 10% better, but you've also got the potential of making that 10% worse, would you be happy with that? And I think people understand risk when you put it into that form of context. It is the money in the building society, safe. If you want to earn more than the building society, you have to take the potential downside. And I think, putting it into pounds and pence for people helps them comprehend it. I think when people talk at value at risk and stuff like that, which we do as an industry, it's really hard for members of the public to get a handle on that.
Yeah. Moving back to sort of the advice section, we can't all recruit from the NHS. So what would you suggest as the best way of attracting the next generation of financial advisors?
I think there's two things. I think the industry has to get a better reputation. I was, again, chatting to a professor from LSE, London's School of Economics, and I said to him, why aren't your graduates coming into our industry anymore? And he said, they see it as boring, they see it as over-commoditized, and it's not exciting. So I said to him, where are they going? And he said, new media. So I think to get people back into our industry, we have to repaint it as it is exciting. It's a fantastic industry to work in. We have to get people to realise that what the financial services industry does is so implicit to the success of our economy. And it's almost like we have to recast where this is seen by the general public. And I think that will get us back to encouraging people to rejoin our industry. But there is a real misconception now in terms of that younger generation that working in financial services is fuddy-duddy and it's destined for the sort of Jurassic Park situation.
Yeah, well, we keep saving the DNA of everyone we talk to on Advisor Channel just so we can reconstruct them later. Touched obliquely on regulation a little bit at the beginning, but if you were head of the FCA for a day, what would you do?
I would insist that all my key officials spend time with industry participants, not regulating them, but actually seeing the complexity that they enable us or require us to deal with. To use a football analogy, I think, ex-players would make great refs because they understand the game. I think too many of the regulators are, very well intentioned, but don't necessarily appreciate the complexity they're forcing down the line. to enable us or to allow us to do our jobs. And I think regulation is hugely important, coming back to the trust factor, but I think there needs to be a better relationship between good regulation and the ability for the industry to function. And therefore I would insist that all my key individuals spend time with the industry as participants rather than observers.
Excellent. Well, we call this series Advisor Champions, and we always ask our participants to pick somebody from history or fiction that they think would make a good advisor champion.
Well, my choice would be Audrey Hepburn.
Yeah.
And why would I go for Audrey Hepburn?
Yep.
I think she's multi-generational in appeal. I think she has a degree of sophistication, but that mass appeal, I think, goes across the board. So she just wouldn't appeal to the upper echelons, she's across the board. And the other thing is she has one of my favourite quotes of all time, where she says, she talks about the word impossible, and she says, nothing is impossible, because if you look at the word, it says, I'm possible.
Get that made into a t-shirt. And maybe that's the answer to this next question. How can the advice sector best go about being its own champion, apart from wearing that t-shirt?
I think definitely wearing that t-shirt. I think the other thing I think the industry needs to get better at is we need to live to the standards we aspire to. And that therefore puts an obligation on us all. If we believe there are participants in our industry that are not living to the standards that we want, we have to call them out. And that requires whistleblowing, you know. And I think too often in the past I've been to see advisors and they talk about X down the road being a bit of a charlatan, and you know, but it's not my problem, it's the regulators. It is all our problems, and I think we have to take responsibility. If people are doing inappropriate things, we have to call them out. And that doesn't mean, you know, at my school, you know, they used to say, snitches get stitches. This is not that situation. This is about us as an industry demonstrating we are professional. And the only way you regain trust is to remove some of the bad practices.
Thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you very much for watching. Please do watch out for further Advisor Champion videos in the future.